So, hello everybody, and welcome back to the NeuroCalm Fatigue Summit. Yes, again, my name is Anna Greer, and today I'm delighted to have with me Dr. Terry Marks-Tarlow. Now, Dr. Terry Marks-Tarlow is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Santa Monica, California, with specialty in creativity issues, mind-body work, and deep transformation. And she's the author or editor of more than 10 books on clinical intuition, mythology, nonlinear science, and interpersonal neurobiology, all of which she has illustrated herself. She hosts workshops and trainings nationally and internationally, and is adjunct professor at Pacifica Graduate Institute and California Institute of Integral Studies. Plus, she's core faculty at the Insight Center, Los Angeles. That's a very impressive list of qualifications there, Terry. So, Terry, would you mind talking to us a bit about the role of trauma in the production of chronic health issues?
Absolutely. So we now know that trauma starts much earlier than we used to think. When I was going through graduate school in the 1980s, trauma was thought of as an event that happens like a car accident or a robbery or a rape, some discrete event in childhood or in adulthood. But now we know that trauma can start in the womb. It can start with the chemicals in the mother's hormonal mix that gets across to the fetus. And much trauma starts in infancy with a whole attachment system. And so there's a whole category of trauma called relational trauma that has to do with the infant not being met emotionally or physically completely. And this can happen in very subtle ways. And it turns out that if we are unable to contain the emotions that we're feeling, if the emotions are too strong, positive or negative, then they tend to go into the body. And that's when symptoms can easily develop. So the earlier the trauma, the greater the possibility that the framework is not strong enough or sturdy enough to hold what's happening emotionally. And then it goes right into the body. So there probably also is a genetic component for chronic fatigue issues. And my belief is that we all hold stress in a characteristic way. So our personalities are such that some people turn to drugs and alcohol or other forms of self-soothing. Some people get headaches, some people get backaches. Each person has a kind of a characteristic sort of like weakest link in the body. Mm-hmm. Stress tends to go into. And so one of the elements for chronic fatigue is if a person has been really pushing themselves very, very hard through stress, and with the feeling like I just have to keep going, I need not to pay attention to my body, this sort of thing. That kind of personality style and that kind of driving force on the body can wind up in chronic fatigue.
Yeah, and presumably, Terry, the relational trauma is becoming more problematic as parents are pressed harder and harder by social structures and are unable, in a sense, to be there in the same way attentionally, holding relationally their infants. Presumably, we can see an expanding number of fatigue cases in those conditions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there are two things going on there. One is that people are financially stressed, and so both parents are working. Children are sent to daycare too early, and sometimes daycare is wholly inadequate
Mm.
for infants. When the ratio is too high and there are too many children per caretaker, and it doesn't mimic sort of a grandparent or an extended family member, which is really more ideal if it can't be a primary parent that's there. So parents are more stressed, and so there's a contagion effect just of that on the one hand, and then their availability is less on the other hand, and both of those things are going to contribute to more and more cases over time, which seems to be happening. Whether this is a diagnostic issue that we're now more familiar with this kind of autoimmune condition and we can spot it more easily, and doctors are no longer saying it's all in your head and this is not a real thing because they don't know how to diagnose. And by the way, as a clinician in practice for so many years, for almost 40 years, maybe more than 40 years if I um, uh, it's I've really seen a lot of cases like this, and the sensitivity to these kinds of diagnoses has really changed over time, which is a really good thing.
It is, isn't it? And it gives us a big clue for many people suffering from chronic fatigue for a candidate field in which to look in the early attachment material when all the other more obvious things might have been cleared out of the way. I'm curious to know, Terry, how you get into the layers of the unconscious when you're working with someone with chronic fatigue.
Mhm. Well, I do a lot of teaching of interpersonal neurobiology, which, by the way, I think when we work with people by helping them understand what's happening in their bodies, what's happening in their brains, um, it is so much uh, less likely that the people that I'm working with will feel shamed about what they're experiencing. So this whole field of mind-body work is really important these days in that respect. And we now know really that the unconscious exists in the body, and that's true for everybody. And we used to have a very kind of disembodied style. The original psychoanalysis was quite disembodied, where people would just be um, thinking about making associations and this sort of thing without paying attention either to what's going on in their body or to the relationship with the therapist. So my own style is to work very relationally. That's not true with everybody. Not everybody needs that kind of attention to what's happening in the room between us. But I have a kind of whole side of myself that is very body related. And I used to keep that quite separate. So I've been doing yoga for more than 40 years. Um, and I've been dancing ballet, and I was a very serious rock climber. And I had this whole life of my body that when I was first in practice, I was not taught had anything to do with um, clinical work. And it's been maybe the last 10 years, especially, that these two have come together. So when I work with people, I pay very close attention to what's happening in their bodies as one way of getting to the deep unconscious. And the other way is working with imagery. I used to do hypnosis as a sort of a style in, and now I tend more to either do waking suggestions with people or guided imagery or working with dreams to get into the body. That's another wonderful way of getting into the body.
Absolutely fantastic. Now, I think you sent me an image, Terry, of um, something that you did with a particular client. I can try and screen share that for everyone.
I think if we start with the image, then I can explain
There we go.
the context for the image. So, in fact, yes, let's leave the image up as we talk about this case. This is a case that I have written up in Psyche's Veil, my book Psyche's Veil, which was my first attempt to bring nonlinear thought into clinical practice. And this piece is called The Wild Woman. And the patient was another therapist who had fibromyalgia, and she was the daughter of a mother who also had fibromyalgia. And the mother was very narcissistic, had a narcissistic personality. And so when this woman came for treatment, she was feeling trapped at multiple levels. She was feeling trapped in her own body by her fibromyalgia. And she was feeling trapped in the body of her mother because she was quite enmeshed with her mother at the time. And so she was sort of having the literal feeling of being trapped in her mother's body, as well as by her mother emotionally. And so we did lots of work together. We probably had worked together for a couple of years at the point that the image of the wild woman came up spontaneously. And I tend to do, by the way, long-term therapy with people because this kind of a chronic issue is, and especially when it's attachment related, it takes a long time and it takes a deep connection with the therapist to make changes that, to do mind-body work in ways that reach deeply into the body. So when this image came up, it was of a wild woman, a fairy-like woman with wings, who was trapped inside her body. And the wild woman was looking out her front and holding on to the bars of the cage that was keeping her inside. And she was just riveted in the front of this woman's body. So this was a fabulous opportunity to work with an image. When images come up spontaneously, they're very important, as opposed to, they tend to be deeper. Spontaneous images do tend to be deeper. And so this image was, the wild woman was something we came back to over the course of several months, again and again, depending on what was going on in the woman's life. And the reason that I wound up writing about it was because there was a spontaneous shift one day where previously the wild woman was just stuck in the front of the body, and she just wasn't going anywhere, and she was longing to get out of this woman's body. And one day, spontaneously, the wild woman turned around and walked to the back of her cage. And when she did this, she saw that the cage not only was open, but had always been open. And so from that point forward, the wild woman had some freedom to leave the body and come back. And so there was a notable change in this woman's body and in this woman's feeling about her own symptoms at the point that happened. When I wrote about it, I was writing about a complexity model of health and mental health. And this is a really important difference from the conception, the sort of traditional conception that health is connected to stability and sameness and regularity, because that's just not how it works. That's how our linear reductive mind likes to think about it, but that's not how life works. And so the change is to the notion of complexity and variability, and the ability to change up what we do, what we feel, our access to all emotions, all coping styles, and to be able to fit the context with whatever emotion and whatever coping is necessary. So it's variability, and it's being able to deal with the unknown comfortably by trusting the self and by opening ourselves up to our own intuition. So I write not only about clinical intuition in therapists, but about the importance of intuition for all people, for inner guidance, for guidance from the inside out. And so when the wild woman walked to the back of the cage, she complexified her situation. Previously, she was only stuck in the front. And in the yogic world, the front of the body is the conscious mind, but the back of the body is the unconscious mind, because we can't see what's back there. We have to just trust and work with it sight unseen. And so by walking to the back, she was accessing a greater complexity, more dimensions of being, and she was breaking out of the superficiality of only paying attention to the front. And of course, for a narcissist or a narcissistic dynamic, the front of the body is going to be the superficial appearance. And so being able to access more of the self was key. And so that is the story of the wild woman.
That's absolutely wonderful. I'm struck there by the strength of the openness, the idea of stepping back into the unknown, the open, a realm of possibilities that are non-linear, not pre-known by either of you. That stepping out into that intuitive sense of I'm stepping out and I kind of get caught. I land. I'm held in some way by that beautiful sense of the opening out itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And fatigue can close us in also. It can, through our worlds, it can close us in. But in order for any kind of therapy to be effective, we have to be open. And openness is a quality. It was one of Eysenk's original 5 factors. In some ways, it's been known, in other ways, it's been lost. But the more rapid that society changes, the more we can't depend on what's already been known, and we have to step out into the unknown. And certainly if we want to heal, we have to step into novelty, because going back to what we've already known, what's worked before but it's not working now, none of that is going to work. We have to be willing to go over that edge
Absolutely.
into the
unknown. That endless repetition keeps us trapped in, it kind of solidifies the problematic structures that lock us in. The only thing that I'm thinking of here as well about this wonderful thing about openness and relationalities, of course, for lots of people with chronic fatigue, relationships are very difficult because they actually get isolated by the fact of their illness itself. I'm just wondering, Terry, if you have any thoughts about how people might use their imagination to construct a sense of relationality where they lack one in their day-to-day interactions. For me, this is where maybe meditation and shifting consciousness can come in. But are there ways that we can use our imaginations and imagery and bodily sensing to connect even when there's no obvious sense of anyone around, and relationships are difficult because we're too knackered to do anything.
Well, this is one advantage. Let me take a tiny little sidetrack from the imagination and say that one advantage to going virtual with therapy is that people can have relationships without leaving their home from their very beds. I have done therapy with people who are lying in bed in a way that only a house call would have previously been able to do that. But I think that this does open up some degree of flexibility and possibility for chronic fatigue people who are having difficulty leaving their homes. On the one hand, that said, I understand that it takes a lot of emotional energy to interact. So even interacting virtually might be too difficult at many times for people. And this is where imagination is a beautiful thing. I think imagination, first of all, we heal through imagination. Imagination has been way underrated in our field and in society in general because it's often associated with fantasy or unreality. But from the point of view of the brain and the body, imagination and perception follow the same pathways internally. So the neural pathways are exactly the same for perception and imagination. And the more that we practice healing through our imaginations, the more perception and the body can follow suit. And this is something that guided imagery or the arts are wonderful tools for evoking the imagination. So, for example, I can give you a tool that I recently used as a healing kind of imagination kind of thing. Is people can do self-guided imagery, and the more that you practice that, the better you get at it. And it's a little different than mindfulness, the kind of mindfulness that is simply watching what's going on inside. Yeah. Here, it's constructing, actually using healing imagery. And so one that I really like to use is having people walk through a forest, and a forest is archetypally or symbolically connected to the unconscious. So going in the woods is one image for it. So is water, bodies of water is another one. But in this particular case, going through the woods is a great one because that really captures the feeling of kind of being in this dense environment where you have to feel your way through movement. And so finding the woods of your imagination and then going to a clearing where there's a healing body of water. And the body of water can either be warm and flowing, and it can be a very unrealistic, because the other thing about the imagination that is lovely is that it doesn't have to follow reality at all. And so the more that people can individualize a healing environment for themselves that just is what their mind creates and what their mind needs, the better. But it's a very soothing image to get to that clearing and enter that body of water. And then you can actually meditate from inside of that and have some nested imagery where you've got embedded images, one inside the other, which is something that Milton Erickson understood when he was doing his form of hypnosis. But people can can do that. And that helps you go deeper, by the way. So closing your eyes, first closing your outer eyes to do some imagery. And then once you arrive in the pool of healing water, closing the inner eyes of your imagination a second time in order to focus on the body, focus on how it feels to be in that water, and circulating the warmth and circulating the oxygen. And of course, breathing deeply also. Um, Learning how to just slow the breath is key to calming, and it's key to oxygenating all the cells in the body, which is really, really important for people who, especially if they're in any sort of fight flight kind of scared or hyper aroused condition.
And there are some beautiful intimacies at work in that as well, aren't there? Because we co-evolved with trees, and trees archetypally are intensely relational. They have, wonderful networks of communication. They are wise, grounded, open, hospitable, all that. And then water, we ourselves are bodies of water. There's so much there in terms of the intimacy between the way the human body actually evolved, the way it actually functions, and the imagery, that you're getting so many layers there of healing potential, aren't you?
Absolutely. And there is lots of research now that nature, being in nature itself, is intrinsically healing. So much so that people who are in the hospital that have access to a window and able to see trees, or even just a picture of the woods or a tree, they will heal more rapidly from their stay in the hospital. And one of the reasons that nature is intrinsically healing, and as you say, it's not just outside us, it's inside us. And trees in particular have fractal structure to it. And it turns out that looking at fractals is also intrinsically healing. And that's another thing people can do, which is something very near and dear to my heart. I really think that there's a reason that trees have made it into many of the spiritual traditions, ancient spiritual traditions. The tree of life has arisen again and again in different religious traditions, and including this idea as above, so below, which is a very fractal notion. And when you look at trees, you look at their branching structure, the branches have that fractal branching, self-similar branching, holistic patterning that the roots have. And as you are saying, Anna, the roots are interconnected with the other trees in the forest and through the algae, and there's healing potential with the mother trees in the grove, and so all of this is connecting with what's in the body. So our bodies have the very same branching structure that the trees have. Our circulatory system has it. The neurons of in our brains have it, and in our lungs also, all the same branching structures. That V shape that just goes into smaller and smaller V patterns on different scales is the classic fractal pattern that connects our bodies with nature in the outer world, that connects inner and outer through open portals.
Absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I believe trees also emit certain substances that are known to affect our bodies, and that's why people go forest bathing and get incredible benefits from that. And I've got one client that I work with who, he's very debilitated, and he can only do like 20 minutes at a time online, but the forest is his instinctive go-to when he wants to visualize, when he needs to get to his safe space. the forest is where he always goes. I think there's something very deep in the human relationship with trees here that is profound and really speaks to perhaps ecology as well, the links between our biology and ecology, and the sense in which we really are earthlings. And the more we embrace that, the more we embrace our body's intelligence, the more we understand that we are embodied, interconnected, networked creatures, the more healthy we tend to be.
That's absolutely so. And the more that we're able to get into our right brain and out of our left brain, and this is something really important for people with chronic fatigue, is to soften the thinking, to soften the catastrophizing kinds of thoughts. What if, what did I do wrong that made this happen? And what if it never goes away? And just all of that endless thought looping actually is an energy drain that makes us feel more tired. And so to be able to silence the thinking and connect with the right brain, which is the relational side of the
yes, absolutely.
Yes, and so it's relational in many ways. It's open, it's the one that's more open to the body, and the body's more open to the world. So it's the one that's open to other people. Whereas the thinking side is in a vacuum, and it's closed. And so I really love what you're saying about the forest being a kind of relational connection. And that's really, it's really true. It's important to not only understand our own developmental history. Now we know about relational trauma, which we didn't know about before, but evolutionarily, to understand our evolutionary history as well is really useful in terms of we share the same emotional system, and most of the genes with our animal relatives, and so we can feel connected even when we're not in the presence of people, if we can drop into our right brain side. It's got a natural ebullience to it, because just the very feeling of connection brings a feeling of safety.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings us back in a way to that wonderful information you gave about how even the sight of trees influences healing outcomes for people in hospital. That's an extraordinary piece of information. So, Terry, we're moving to a close now. So I'm wondering what one piece of advice you would, obviously, the use of the imagination and that beautiful meditation you gave us, the visualization trip and the meditation in the middle, closing the second set of eyes. But what one thing would you want to say to people with chronic fatigue that they really, you feel strongly that they need to really hear and take in?
Well, I guess this may be an opportunity to speak about my coloring book.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, so I have created a coloring book called Truly Mindful Coloring that is, I think, the only coloring book that has content and actually has guided imagery scripts for different qualities of mind. And so this can help people to differentiate from moments when there are what they need is to calm down and to do something that is soothing. And so using a coloring book, moving our hands back and forth in that rhythmic way is a bit like stroking our own bodies or being stroked. And there's something about that repetitive movement. It's a bit like a baby rocking in a crib to calm down, and or patting someone else, which can calm ourselves down, and this sort of thing to use to color as a way of either calming down, or there are ways of using that coloring book to be creative if there's more energy, and taking the time to ask oneself, what do I need today? Do I need tiny little spaces to just turn my mind off, or do I need to invoke my own creativity to jumpstart my imagination? Do I need a broad kind of open focus, or do I need a more narrow kind of focus? So the coloring book, I think, is a great tool for anybody who wants to get a little more inwardly focused, a little more able to differentiate different forms of consciousness and different needs, different internal needs.
That's really wonderful, Terry. And I think you've given 3 pages from that or something as a free gift to the audience, haven't you?
Yes, I have indeed. And
wonderful. Terry, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank you on behalf of everyone for an incredibly rich conversation and insight into so many layers of the unconscious, imagination, attachment trauma, relational trauma, all of it. It's absolutely wonderfully rich. And in even getting fractals in there.
Even got fractals in there. And I want to thank you, Anna, for doing this. This is an incredible service that you're doing to the community, and it's an honor to have been part of it.
Thank you so much, Terry. Really appreciate it.